at you. Good Tuesday, everybody. Welcome once again to BTL Bass Talk Live, where we're going to talk bass fishing and anything else that we want to talk about. Matthew, a very, very fun, exciting weekend. We couldn't go to the lake because everything is blown out here in Oklahoma, but there was a lot of stuff to be entertained by.
And a lot of stuff to be disappointed by.
We have to mention right off the top, because in case you don't know, I don't know if Matt is, but I think you are. Are you a huge Blues fan?
Did you not listen to the second half of the show yesterday?
Dude, I'm just making sure, all right? I'm just making sure. That's all I'm doing.
Yeah, I got, the
did
last
you get the jacket?
I got the jacket. I sent you pictures of me wearing the jacket.
I didn't get them.
Yeah, you did.
I did not.
Okay.
I would have brought that up.
I guess you didn't.
You need to send those to anyway.
Oh, I guess I didn't send them to you.
Yeah.
Oh, I apologize.
That's all right. Anyway.
Look at that right there.
Oh, that is epic. The starter jacket.
The starter half-zip jacket and then the Blues jersey.
That's impressive.
I was wearing the Blues jersey until the third period, and then I took it off and threw it across the room in a fit of anger as the Blues blew a 2-0 lead to go down 1-0 to the Boston Bruins in the Stanley Cup Finals.
It was pretty entertaining, at least the first period, but the way that Boston adjusted after that first period.
They were the better team.
They were. So we'll see what happens in game two.
I realized that I owed you money on Tuesday morning after the Blues lost on Monday night. So here it is for the
My
Smith
$5.
Well, I got to sign it. Do you want me to sign it or not?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what you want to put on there.
I'm just going to put HFA ?
Yeah. Smith. I think it's the first time in the history of this show that I didn't take the HFA. And I made $5 for it. But I will not be using
that was the bet from
$5
before that I'm making good on. Oh, that's in pink, too.
Oh, that's very nice.
The Kevin Short signature there.
Thank you.
For the fact that an Alabama angler did not win 2 stages ago on Smith Lake.
Yeah.
That was actually won by an Arizona angler, Dean Rojas, and who the hell knows who's going to win next week when they return to Table Rock.
Actually,
it's like
this
today,
week.
Tomorrow.
Friday is the first day.
So that means they practice Wednesday, Thursday.
Right.
So practice starts tomorrow. I've seen guys doing all sorts of fun stuff on Table Rock.
We'll get into that here in a minute. All right, good group of shows this week. Today we're going to have Jean Gilliland on, Bass's Director of Conservation. He's going to come on here right after the break. And looking forward to this. I know there's quite a few people that might have some questions as far as fish management and any other thing that is related to conservation. That's one of the reasons why we wanted to have Jean on. And then tomorrow we're going to have Brandon Card on, having a decent season, not bad. Had a good performance at Lake Fork, so we're going to see what he has to say about his season. And then on Thursday, the final practice day, getting ready for phase 2 of Table Rock. I thought it'd be cool to get the other guy who was disappointing in his performance on Table Rock. Mr. James Watson's going to be live from the water on Thursday as he kind of breaks down what he did right, what he did wrong, and then what he's going to fix this week. I flat out asked him, Matthew, when I talked to him, I said, are you going to pull your head out of your butt? Plain and simple. And he said, yes, absolutely. He said part of the reason why he did not have success in the prior week is he lost a ton of fish. Mm-hmm. That's what he said.
I completely could
and maybe
see
that's
that
because of the style or the pattern or whatever he was doing. So we're going to get into that on Thursday. A couple of things real quick. John Cox getting it done once again.
You called it.
On the chick. He's just a monster, man.
Bassmaster Open, I think he led that thing wire to wire, ended up winning by over 4 pounds. He's probably going to qualify for the Elite Series in both the Central and the Eastern Open divisions.
Yeah.
He's in the top 10 in both. I was doing a little bit of just research on him. Obviously, we've seen what he's done with the FLW Cups and the Tour victories, but he's only fished 39 tournaments over on the bass side, and he's got $232,000. And most of those tournaments were $1,500 entry fee.
That's pretty good.
So he's averaging $6,000 a tournament with a $1,500 entry fee. Even if he's spending $1,500 on expenses on that, which then he's up to $3,000, he's still basically banking $3,000 every time he launches his boat in a BASS event, and he's got 23 top 20 finishes out of those 39.
Yeah,
so he has qualified before. He has opted to stay with the FLW Tour, and rightfully so. We see what he can do over there. He's in the hunt for the Angler of the Year, so it'll be interesting to see if he will have another decision to make in 2020. And I think for the first time in BASS history, I think also in the top 40 there were 2 Australians
on.
With Carl and Dean Sylvester that fished Chickamauga.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. I did not notice that. Yeah. Interesting. All right. I want to mention a couple of things real quick. You know, we have some people at Joe Gibbs Racing. They listen to us and all that and everything. I got to admit, I mean, I'm kind of what you would call a casual racing fan.
Right.
But this weekend is a very special weekend from a racing standpoint because you have 2 huge events taking place. Do you know what they are, Matthew?
They had the Indianapolis 500.
That's one of them.
And then one of the guys that Truex Jr., isn't it, that BASS sponsored? He's got the Bass Pro Shops. Didn't he win?
He won. He won the Coca-Cola 600. Yeah. So it was really cool because I watched both of them. Mm-hmm. The one thing out of the Indy 500,
the milk pour was phenomenal.
Oh, it was great. It was epic. I guess the first time that a French dude won since the 1920s.
Yep.
Anyway, did you see the road rage at 230 miles an hour?
I did not see the road rage.
Alexander Rossi was not happy because I guess he was getting cut off at 230 miles. Anyway, as he's passing some dude that was down a lap, he's giving him this.
The fist pump with a single finger?
No, he didn't flip him off.
No, just the fist pump.
Yeah, he's just like pointing at him, you know, doing that. But he's doing 230 miles an hour.
Roll him off the track. Interesting.
Yeah. So road rage at 230 miles an hour. But you're right, Martin Truex Jr. getting it done at the Coca-Cola 600. And that was a very entertaining race, too. I didn't watch all
Jumping
of it.
Bass all over the uniform. Between the Bass Patch and the Bass Pro Shops, he just was...
everywhere.
It was pretty cool to see that, and I saw it on a bunch of the social media stuff.
Yeah, everywhere. So congrats to those guys. I know they listen to us every day, and nice win on that. So a big weekend in racing. And then the last thing, you know, I had several emails once again, and continue to send those emails in with feedback, and somebody got a little irritated with too much weather talk, Matthew. Now, listen.
It's justified now.
I talk about the weather because, especially all across the midsection of the country, the weather has become the story. It really has. The amount of rain that is coming through the Midwest and specifically Oklahoma, we're going to talk to Gene about it. We've never seen the Arkansas River at the levels that it is currently at. And how much influence does the Arkansas River have on bass fishing across the Midwest, from border to border?
As much as the Mississippi does it. You're now talking about the weather, Mark. You're now 2 levels deep on it. You thought the hate mail was strong before.
I wanted to address it, folks. It has a massive impact. And Matt and I were both discussing whether or not they're going to have the Costa at Grand Lake here in, 2 weeks?
Yeah, I was thinking 50-50 now based on what's supposed to come in. I'm thinking maybe
they're calling 4 to 6 inches more today and tomorrow. And it's headed right toward eastern Oklahoma.
It is what it is.
So it'll be interesting to see what FLW does on that to either reschedule it. I can't see them canceling it. I know some BFLs across the region have been canceled due to the high water. But man, it's crazy. I know they're doing some voluntary evacuations in Fort Smith, Arkansas, where the Arkansas River runs through there. So just a crazy, crazy amount of water that is affecting so many places across the Midwest. The other thing I want to get to, you know, I was looking for guests this week, and FLW is kind of at a break stage? Is that how you would?
Yeah, they're kind of gearing up for the last tour stop of the season.
At Champlain.
They always typically have kind of a month and a half, 2 month break. They front load their schedule really heavy because they start in January, which most of the other tours will start in February or March, and then they wait until kind of that prime time for that last one, and then they have the Forest Wood Cup after that in August. So there's always kind of a couple month break, and that's kind of what we're in right now.
All right. So what I thought is I was going through the standings, and there's a couple of guys in there I'm not familiar with. I'm going to try and make contact with them and hopefully try to get them on the show next week.
Guys,
I know you're going to be
in the hunt.
Yeah. Guys that have really, had a decent performance this year and in the hunt going into the final event. Some guys have not even qualified for the FLW Cup before. So we'll take a look at that and see if we can get them on.
Look who's leading the Angler of the Year over there.
John Cox.
Yeah, shocker.
And you know who's in second? I'm not looking it up. I believe it's David Dudley.
It is David Dudley.
Yeah.
And then Buddy Gross, Joseph Webster, Scott Martin, Terry Bolton.
That's a great race.
Brian Thrift, Jeremy Lawyer, Braxton Sexter. And then your boy, who you've got the life-size fathead poster of all over your bedroom walls. He's less than 100 points out.
Yeah.
Miles Berghoff.
Yeah, we'll see. One event remains. So.
Boy, I'll tell you what, you win this year, and you are up there.
Yeah.
Because Andrew Upshaw's in 18th. He's got to win. Brian Latimer's in 12th. He's got to win. Jeremy Lawyer's in 8th. He's got to win.
Yeah.
Terry Bolton's in 6th. He's got to win.
Yeah. Just kind of going on the break. And then the other thing that I want to mention next week, you're going to be gone, right? But we're still doing a show.
I'll be at Kurt Dove's youth camp, the pro bass camp for, I think, the 5th year in a row there at Lake Amistad, catching them in 100-degree weather.
There you have it. And then already have one guest lined up for next week while you're down there. We're going to have Bill Lowen on. Bill Lowen, currently sitting in 9th place, and what he's doing, he's actually going to be live from Lake St. Clair. He's doing some smallmouth fishing.
Oh, St. Clair up in...
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He's expanding his
He's
horizon.
got something going on, and I thought it'd be cool. Yeah, dude, let's get you on live from the water. Should have a good cell signal. He said he'd stay close. So next week we're going to talk to Bill Lowen, and having a good year, man. 9th place in the points. Solid season. So once again, thought it'd be a good idea to get him on, have him talk about his season. We mentioned, we've discussed it, we've talked about it numerous times about the back-to-back with Table Rock. And folks, I was just a little confused. I guess that's the best word for a little derby that was taking place while supposedly it was off limits. And Matthew, what are your thoughts on that?
All right, so this is the best I can kind of tell. A lot of the guys, that you follow on social media kind of posted something about fishing on Table Rock. And the way I had understood it when we had Mike McClellan on a week ago said that basically I thought that it went off limits to them on that Sunday. Once they had kind of made that decision that they were going to go back to Table Rock. And then on Thursday, there was like a Legends tournament that was on Table Rock out of Big Cedar. And it was Roland Martin and Jimmy Houston,
Bill Dance,
and then some guy named Johnny Morris. I don't know how he got it. I don't know how he got into that group.
The most powerful man in the industry.
But they fished with Timmy Horton and Odd Defo and Kevin Van Dam and Edwin Evers.
All Bass Pro Shops guys.
And best I could determine, they had a derby on Table Rock on Thursday.
When it was off limits?
When it was off limits to the rest of the field. Now, obviously, they're Bass Pro Shops Nitro guys.
Yeah.
And some of the top ones out there.
Yeah.
And they fish with these Legends. Now, I know it's probably scheduled way in advance and months in advance, but I tried to dig a little more into this, and the best I could determine was 76 guys weren't allowed on Table Rock, but these guys got to go out and fish a tournament on Table Rock as it was coming back. So I was just I thought that was an interesting
It is
side
interesting.
Note.
It is.
I mean,
interesting.
I get it. I understand. Major title sponsor. It is the Bass Pro Tour to get these legends together all in one spot with their schedules. Because I mean, these guys are still like Energizer bunnies between Bill, Johnny, Jimmy, and Roland. I mean, they're just as active as they were 20, 30 years ago, if not more. But I mean, if you're going to be the purest form of competitive bass fishing in the top level, I would like to hear what some of the other guys thought about that, because even if it is just a section, even if it is a made for TV thing, I mean, you're on the water, the tournament.
Honestly,
water.
I just think they want to get through this week and move on. I really do. I think it's just the circumstances and everything.
And we could be totally wrong about this but based on what they didn't go to Bull Shoals, they didn't go anywhere. There's a picture of them on the dock with their boats. Is it going to
make that big of a difference? Who knows? Who knows?
Who knows?
It could. But it couldn't.
I mean, you're talking about, if you want to say it, what these guys are saying, the top level, the cream of the top.
You stay off the water,
stuff.
I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that. I don't know. If I was one of those 80 guys, it would make me scratch my head a little bit if I wasn't one of those.
Like I said, I really think they just want to get through this week and move on and go on down the road to the next one and build into 2020.
And if we're off base on this or that wasn't the case.
Yeah, Jim in Indiana throws an instant feedback out there. How about the top 10 that were not able to view any of the footage that everybody else was doing?
Yeah.
I said,
there's a bunch of different things.
They just want to move on. I really, really believe that they just want to go on down the road and get done with it.
And then the different times, and then there's a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, it is what it is. We're gonna see if the time thing works, and just kind of see how the whole thing works out. All right. Anything else over the weekend? Did you really go to Spavinaw?
Yeah, absolutely. Went to Spavinaw, which is one of the few lakes that isn't completely blown out in Oklahoma.
Can't have a tournament on there unless it's a tiny boat.
Yeah, right? No, they've had smaller tournaments. Actually, you can do some like catchway release stuff on there. I don't know. I think it said there was an 18-mile-an-hour speed limit. I don't know if I read that correctly, but I couldn't even get on pad there, but caught a couple fish. It's got a lot of grass in it. So as I get ready towards the end of my season for a Rayburn, some grass lakes, I might go out there. I mean, I did a little punching. Cool. I did some fluking over the top of it. Didn't catch a bunch, caught a couple nice ones, but it was good to get out in the Bass Cat and get it going again while there was really no other. Holy cow, I'm looking at that picture. Jean Gilliland on the bass boat. How big is that smallmouth?
You can ask him.
Where'd you find that picture? That thing is a beast.
I have no idea. Somewhere. You know what I did? I mowed the neighbor's yard. Did you notice that on the corner?
You mowed the neighbor's yard?
Yeah, I was tired of looking at it.
Are they not living there?
No. They had a fire there and all that.
Wait,
and
these neighbors right here?
No. On the corner.
Oh, the ones that...
Yeah.
So it's just vacant.
No, he's trying to
anyway. Out of the kindness of your heart.
I ran into him, and he's going through a lot.
And you were like, "Hey, can I mow your yard?"
I'll just mow your yard for you because it was looking really. It's making the neighborhood
Jeffrey's
looking really bad.
Team player, helpful.
That's right.
Kind-hearted.
Didn't even send him a bill.
What a kind-hearted individual.
All right, we're coming back here on a Tuesday with Jean Gilliland. Everybody, stay tuned.
Sleek new design with easy control file. The clearest images underwater with uncompromising range. Live mapping from the touchscreen. View notifications, video, even Google Maps on screen. And for the first time ever, real-time view of fish movements with live sight sonar. HDS Live. New from Lowrance.
I got my power pole down, stuck in the mud in the bottom of the lake, sitting so still in the wind and the waves, could even be a hurricane. I got my power pole down.
AFCO has a new foul weather rain suit called the Hydronaut. A lot of the features that I really like about it first is the speed vent hood. If it's raining out, how a person gets wet is when you run down the lake and the hood comes down. With the speed vent hood, it's going to stay up. It has a camera mount in the pocket on the chest. The Hydronaut has a 2-layer, 100% waterproof nylon shell. If you're interested in a rain suit that has a lot of cool features that's going to keep you dry, you need to check out the Hydronaut from AFCO.
Aaron Martins here. I'm going to be telling you about a new product by Sunline. It's Siglon PE x8. I've been using it almost extensively all year for my frogging, flipping, drop shotting, shaky heading, worming, jerk baiting. It's by far my favorite Sunline braid. I honestly, I don't say this unless I think it's true, but honestly, it's the best braid in the market of any of the braids. Definitely check it out. It's a price point line, $14.95 for 165 yards, and that could last you a whole year, just one spool with using leader material. It's Siglon PE x8. It's my favorite braid, and I think if you use it, it'll be your favorite braid too.
Blue Water by TH Marine, offering LED lighting solutions for your boat, trailer, truck, ATV, and so much more. Engineered and built to be rugged with waterproof and submersible options. Designed for easy installation, Blue Water is available in a variety of colors and styles. All backed by a limited lifetime warranty. Blue Water by TH Marine.
All right, we are back on a Tuesday, kicking off the week with our special guest in studio. And if you don't know who this guy is, you will after today.
We should have raised his seat a little bit.
Well, he can still
I feel like I need to lower mine a little bit to get.
You can raise that up.
Now we're on the same level, Gene. Look, now we're on the same level. I mean, now I'm on his level. He feels like he's.
He can raise it up. He's been
Stand up for a second.
What are you doing? That's part of your responsibility there, Matthew.
He broke it.
He broke it?
He broke it.
It's just low. It's stuck low.
Okay. Well,
I'll drop my seat down to your level. Oh no, it went up a little bit, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it went up a little bit. We're good.
I can sit on a phone
Yeah.
book, but
I look over and I'm looking over the top
he
of
doesn't
his
even
head.
know what that is.
I'm looking over the top of Gene's head.
It's all good. Gene, man, thanks for taking time out, and greatly appreciate you coming on the show and talking a little bit about fish care and what, maybe some of the things that you have going on from a conservation standpoint. And I might upset a few people, but I'm used to that. I want to jump right in here and ask you my first question. It's near and dear to me, obviously being here in Oklahoma. I really want to know all of this water and the amount of water that is flowing through the Arkansas River. Is that going to have an effect on the fish, not only in the lakes, but also on the river?
Yes.
What would that be? I mean, do they flow? Do they go all the way to the Mississippi? I mean, what happens?
No, for the most part, from a bass fishing perspective, it's going to be very short-term effects. Bass don't flow or tend to leave a lake when we get big floods. They just hunker down and find places out of the current. The more open water fish like stripers and hybrids and walleye and even crappie for that matter tend to flush out more easily when we've got big floods like this. But from the bass perspective, it doesn't do much. The shad, it can move a lot of shad out of a lake, but they're typically so prolific that those are going to be short-term effects. The biggest thing that you'll see with floods like this is it drastically changes the habitat at least for a short time. Muddy water, it rearranges all the shallow water habitat, the brush, the laydowns, stuff like that. And then when you get into the river systems, obviously it scours a lot of the debris out, so you wind up with sand and gravel and bedrock in a lot of places that you used to have good fish habitat. You don't see as much of the habitat movement on the big lakes, other than if it wasn't attached, it's floated up and probably stuck on the bank somewhere, right, 10, 12, 20 feet high. When the water goes back down, all the good stuff is up there where it doesn't really do the fish a whole lot of good. But usually when we have any kind of floods like this, the impacts are relatively short term, as far as at least from a bass fishing perspective.
All right. Chad in Canada, he's hit me right off the bat. He wants to know, what's really better for the fish? Catch and release, or catch, weigh, and release?
Well, obviously for the fish itself, turning the fish loose immediately is going to be better for the individual fish.
Mm-hmm.
The argument, though, needs to be looked at on a broader scale. There haven't been any studies anywhere that have shown that bass tournaments, as we've known them for the last 30 or 40 years, have had any real negative impacts on bass populations. When fisheries managers look at a lake or reservoir, they don't manage one fish at a time. They manage the entire fish population. So what happens to individual fish is not as important as what happens to the whole population. And we've had bass tournaments with traditional weigh-ins for a long, long time, and the impacts that those tournaments are having doesn't seem to be affecting the quality of the fishing. Now, take that back 40 years ago, when we used to have before catch and release really caught on, when we brought fish up on stringers, and we had big filleting parties afterwards, right, and we had fish fries.
Right.
Okay, if that kind of harvest had continued, we certainly would see an impact on the fishery. But bass tournaments, as we know them, the majority of the bass tournaments around the country aren't really having that big an impact on individual lakes and reservoirs. So it kind of becomes a philosophical discussion, really, more than a biological one. As far as me as a fishery manager on whatever lake it is, the length limits, the bag limits, the things that are put on those lakes are there to try to control the amount of harvest and the amount of mortality of fish to maintain a certain level of the fish population. And catch and release versus haul them to a weigh-in, then release them later, is all kind of figured into that equation.
Has there been a study, and I'm assuming there has been, on the average lifespan of a largemouth bass? In other words, does it depend, obviously, because of the body of water, or is there like an age that your typical largemouth bass will live to 5 years?
It varies with part of the country. The further south you are, it's a live fast and die young kind of a thing. The fish typically grow larger, but they don't live as long. So a bass in southern Florida might live 10 or 12 years. They've aged bass in the northern states and in Canada that are 18 to 20 years old.
Wow.
Okay. They grow much slower, but they live longer. So it just depends. It's kind of a climate-related thing.
So here's a question that I was kind of excited when you came in on. Have there ever been studies done on what percentage of bass in a fishery have been caught? And I say that, and I know it changes based on, how many fish are available. I would assume you have a fishery like Lake Fork where it's harder to reach, even though it gets a tremendous amount of pressure. But I asked that question because you get guys at a certain amount of tournament, and they're like, oh, we've caught all the fish in the lake. Or you see a comment where it's like, those guys are going to catch them all. Like, what percent average fish get caught out of a lake?
It varies dramatically by the fishing pressure and just the nature of the lake. You take a lake that has a tremendous amount of habitat, flooded timber, a lot of weeds, that sort of thing, where the fish are a little more inaccessible. You're not going to catch as big a percentage of the fish in a lake. There have been any number of studies done where they've tagged fish to look at, try to get an estimate of how many fish are in the lake, and then looking at creel surveys to figure out how many of them are actually being caught. And sometimes it's a pretty surprisingly high percentage, 50-60% sometimes the fish in some lakes that are actually being caught. And what you'll see in a lot of the situations is some of those fish are obviously being caught over and over. When you look at, I've seen a couple of studies where the number of fish being caught by anglers is actually greater than the number of fish that the population was estimated to be, which means some of those fish are having to be caught 2 or 3 times. They're being recycled.
Wow.
So
Gunnersville.
Bass is going to Gunnersville for the Elite Series. There's been a ton of tournaments on Gunnersville. Right now, let's just say it's probably one of the most pressured lakes. There's a bunch of different habitat on that. You've got docks, you've got grass, but there's a large portion of that lake that's accessible to anglers.
Sure.
Do you have any idea on like a lake like that? Like, I mean, what are the odds that you're catching a fish that's never been caught before when you go there?
I would just have to throw out a wild guess at something like that. It would, that probably half the fish in the lake have probably been caught at one time or another. What one of the things that we figured out years ago, not too many years ago, with the advent of the Alabama rig, is that there's a big population of bass out there that don't ever get fished for. That those suspended bass, those fish that live offshore. And we used to see this years ago in our electrofishing survey. We could come into an area in the springtime and we'd electrofish and we'd see fish all different sizes. And we could do our sampling the rest of the year and never see those fish again. They move offshore somewhere, and a huge percentage of fishermen beat the bank. And so, with the advent of electronics, the sonar we've got now, the mapping, and then tools like, if you want to call it a tool, Alabama rig, things that allow anglers to fish more open water, deep water structure, are starting to exploit a larger percentage of the bass population than what we did, 20 years ago.
Well, I remember back in the late 80s, early 90s, there were people that would scuba dive at Table Rock Lake. We were talking about Table Rock Lake, and they said that there were thousands and thousands of fish that were just out there in the middle of the lake that were suspended that probably people never even fished for.
Yeah.
So
Aaron just caught half of them.
Well, there happened to be some trees.
Aaron just caught half of those.
A great example here in Oklahoma, the smallmouth bass that we stocked back in the late 80s and early 90s in places like Texoma and Eufaula would show up in springtime tournaments, and then nobody would catch them the rest of the year. Those fish went somewhere, and were obviously living and surviving and breeding and doing all the things that fish do. And then the next spring they'd show up again, and people would catch them. So, I think there's always going to be populations, subpopulations within any given body of water. That some of those fish live shallow all the time, some of them live deep most of the time, except maybe during the spawn. And then there's going to be, you take places like the Great Lakes, or where you've got more open water prey, those fish are going to live offshore chasing bait. They're not going to hang around docks and brush piles and laydowns and stuff like that. And until we, the sonar and some of the electronics have really come on in the last few years, a lot of times those fish were kind of inaccessible to the average angler.
All right. John in Texas wants to know, the chemicals that you put in your Livewell, is that a good thing? Short-term effects, long-term effects, any effects on the fish?
Most of the chemicals that go into the products that you buy on the market are blends of proprietary ingredients. Mostly what's in them is salt of one form or another. We bass, we state fish and wildlife agencies don't recommend any of them because the ingredients in them have not been tested and approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration for fish that might get treated and then released and caught again sometime and eaten by somebody. Now, the individual ingredients in those products may be fine and not have any kind of problems or cause any kind of illnesses or disease or anything like that. But when you mix them together and you treat a fish with it and somehow it metabolizes in that fish and then somebody later catches that fish and eats it, then what does it do? Well, we don't know. So we have, for years, we have recommended only the things that FDA approves, and that's ice, salt, and oxygen.
I'm going to have to reevaluate my pre-tournament ritual of taking a shot of G juice before I launch. I never thought that might be.
That's not FDA
I just
approved.
sit there, just like the Gatorade bottle, take a shot, swish it around, and I'm good to go. Gives me kind of clears my head out.
I think realistically, a lot of those products probably do some good things.
Yeah.
But we can't recommend any of them because they don't have that kind of that good housekeeping seal of approval.
Yeah.
The FDA approval, and so. For the most part, we tend to stick with the things that we know work, and that's, cooling the water a little bit, using just plain non-iodized salt at light levels, and keeping the aerators running so that you keep your oxygen levels work. And that's the basic formula that we recommended in our Keeping Bass Alive booklet that was put out in 2002, and so we haven't changed those recommendations really since then.
Do you guys do reports after each tournament and compile all your information from a bass perspective on fish mortality?
I get a report from every tournament on the results of the tournament, the numbers of fish caught, the numbers of fish that were brought in dead, that somebody got a penalty for. Right. And then working with our tournament staff then on how many fish they don't release. Because now that you got to keep in mind that's a different number. The number of fish that come in dead and somebody gets a penalty for is typically a little lower than the numbers of fish we don't release, because we try to instruct our live release boat operators to be rather conservative. If they think that fish is going to struggle and die, we keep them back, and we put them in a cooler, and all of those fish are donated to some charity after every event. Because we don't want any of those fish dying on us 2 or 3, 4 days later and floating up around the boat ramps and the docks and stuff. So we'd rather put them to some good use and donate them to somebody that can use them.
All right. What about tagging? Tagging fish and tracking fish. Have you guys done any of that, Gene?
Yeah. To really do a good job in a tagging study, you've got to tag hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of fish. When you think about, like Matt was saying, there may be tens of thousands of bass in a lake. And the odds of somebody catching a tagged fish are really pretty low. So you've got to tag lots and lots and lots of them. The downside there is that most of the tags that we've used over years don't stay in the fish. They'll shed those tags after about a year. So any kind of studies that are done like that tend to be pretty short term. But that's how you get those estimates of a total population, is you go out and you tag thousands of fish and you keep track of how many are recovered either by anglers or by the state doing some kind of netting or shocking or whatever. And you can do the math and figure out a rough estimate of how many bass are out there. But it takes a lot of work, and you got to have a lot of tags out there in the water.
So it's not like one of the episodes that we've seen on National Geographic where these large ocean fish, where they might tag them and they put a GPS tracking device on there or anything. Has that ever been done?
Oh, yeah. That's a whole different animal now. When you're talking about radio tracking, where you're putting a transmitter in a fish and tracking that fish around, those studies are done pretty regularly with all sorts of species, and bass have been done, smallmouth, largemouth, both, to look at where those fish live over the course of a year. And also there have been a couple of studies done with tagging where they looked at how fish disperse from a tournament release site. You know, there's certain boat ramps, certain launches around different lakes that are the spot where all the tournaments go, and that's where they release all the fish for the most part if they don't have a release boat or trailer or something. And so there have been some studies to look at how long those fish take to get away from that area, how far they go, do they leave at all, that sort of thing.
Talk a little bit about, I believe it was one that you were involved with on Lake Thunderbird, which is right here in Norman, and it is one of those lakes. It is, how big is it? Is it a 7,000 acre lake? So it's a decent sized lake, but also small. You got guys who run up the river, guys who stay down there. The whole lake is fishable. Yeah. And you did a bunch of studies that I remember I've talked to you off air about it, and it's fascinating what those fish do after they're released on the Wednesday nighters.
Yeah, we tagged all the fish that were brought into the Wednesday night jackpot tournament for a year, every Wednesday night, starting in, I can't remember when they started, April through the fall, and released all those fish at the boat ramp, just like the tournament has done for 20 years or more. And then we would come back every week and ask the anglers if they caught any tagged fish and where they caught them. And then we went out and did electrofishing surveys, and we'd look for tagged fish, and we could figure out where they were. So we knew where they started, and we knew where they were caught again. And about 70% of those fish stayed within a half a mile of that boat ramp for a year.
Wow.
There were some, though, that went 7 or 8 miles in a week. Okay. And now you think about, whoa, man, that's a huge... Well, 7 or 8 miles to a fish, if the fish is swimming 2 or 3 miles an hour, which is an average walking pace, that's a day. Okay, it's not like they're climbing Mount Everest. So it seems like a long way. Now, what we don't have information on is how many of those fish went back to where they were caught originally. Theories, for the most part, at least with largemouth bass, are that they have a home range of about maybe a mile square. That's where they live their entire life. They don't migrate much. Now, smallmouth bass tend to migrate a lot more. But if you catch fish on one end of Grand Lake and you haul them up to Wolf Creek and you turn them loose there, they might be 25 miles away from home. They ain't going home. Okay, they don't know where home is. Their GPS isn't that good. Okay. But they will likely find a place somewhere in that area where there's the food and the habitat, the things they need to survive and live, and they'll do just fine. We used to always try to convince people that having a release boat or a trailer or something that you could help redistribute fish around to different parts of the lake was probably a good thing. Not so much from moving the fish around as so they don't stay concentrated right in one area where they're more susceptible to being caught and harvested and taken home to dinner. That's kind of what we saw at Lake Thunderbird, is that the boat ramp is right there at the state park. And there's a lot of people that fish in that area and take fish home to eat. And so by the tournament coming in and putting fish in there every Wednesday night, it was just restocking that area. And so it kind of artificially inflated the amount of harvest that was going on by people that are taking fish home. Now, that's not as big a deal as it was, say, 20 years ago, because people just don't keep bass like they used to. Most of the studies around the country now have shown that the harvest of bass that are caught is only like 5%. Wow. So the vast majority of bass that are being caught by anglers are being released. Now, People always say, oh, yeah, those meat hunters, we saw them out there filling their cooler and they bring ice chests. And okay, maybe they do. But when you average it out over the whole lake, it's like 5% of the bass that are being harvested.
Okay, David in Wisconsin, to kind of bleed off of that, his question is, would it be safe to say that even the few fish that die from bass tournaments would be a good thing from a management perspective, since most of the bass anglers don't harvest?
If he's saying that, if I'm understanding the question right, is he wondering if harvest or mortality from bass tournaments may be a good thing?
Yeah.
Yes, I actually believe that there probably is some credence to that. Managers set length and bag limits based on what we've always thought was a certain amount of mortality that happens every year. As catch and release has caught on, people aren't harvesting bass. So managers have had to try to juggle these length and limits. Take an Arbuckle Lake that you're very familiar with. Wildlife Department here in Oklahoma put a slot length limit on that lake years ago, 1981 in fact, because there were too many little bass. The idea was a slot limit, 13 to 16 inches, you got to turn them loose. Fish under the slot limit, people can take home. People don't take them home now. There's so many fish that are being released that the numbers are still high, and that makes the growth rates a little lower. So if you've got some tournament mortality going on out there, it may be actually helping thin out some of those overabundant bass populations so that you kind of create a better balance between the predators and the amount of food that's out there. I wouldn't say that's the case in all lakes and all reservoirs, but certainly in some situations that little bit of tournament mortality may not be a bad thing. Now, 30, 40 years ago, 40% of the bass that got caught went home with somebody. Now it's 5%, roughly.
Okay.
But tournament mortality has been shown to average somewhere around 20-25%. So bass that are caught in a tournament that die from that tournament, plus the ones that people are taking home, still doesn't equal what we used to keep back in the 50s and 60s and 70s when 40% of the bass went home with somebody. So we're still ahead of the curve.
Fishing question, you talk about taking fish out of their homes and stuff, and you hear these guys talk about all the time, oh, I went back to my spot and it reloaded, or the fish came back in. And then you mentioned a spot like Grand Lake, you take them out of the south end, you move back. Then will fish from within that mile go down and move into those areas that are now vacated for the fish that now call Wolf Creek home?
Yeah.
Or, do you believe fully in that reloading? Are there like fish that are like hanging out there, and then Hank Cherry catches one on a jerk bait and their fish goes, you want that spot? It's open now. Do you want that? No. And then one of them will swim up there and take it? Or is it a fat? Do you believe in is there?
Well, anytime you take a bunch of fish out of an area, nature's going to fill that void. Okay, your fish bowl can hold so many pounds of fish, and so nature's going to try to fill that void. That may be fish moving in from other areas, or it may simply be the ones that are spawned in that area over the course of time growing up and filling that void. But now, when you're talking about something reloading on a short-term basis, remember what I said a minute ago, that a bass has this home range of a mile. They don't sit in one spot all day. Okay, they're constantly going to be moving around. Now they may sit at this brush pile for a while, and then they'll go to this dock for a while, and then they'll go to this rock for a while, and they'll move around. So if you catch a fish and take it out of a spot, there's a pretty good chance that there are other bass in that area, in that home range, that at some point they're going to be making their little milk run.
They're going to go, oh,
and they're going to come back to that spot, and you caught that bass there because it liked that spot. There was something about that spot that it really liked, and obviously the next bass comes along, says, hey, I like this spot too. We used to see that all the time on our electroshocking surveys. You could go down the shoreline and you'd hit a bush and you'd get 7 or 8 bass out of it. The next 3 or 4 or 5 bushes that looked to me exactly the same, not see a fish. And then you'd hit the next one and bang, you'd hit 4 or 5 more bass.
Huh.
I don't know what's different about those bushes because, at least to the angler looking at them from above, they look pretty much the same. But there's obviously something that those bass liked about bush number 1 and bush number 5 that they didn't like about the ones in between. So those key spots, there's something that's attracting those fish. And as these fish kind of move around within their home territory, that's where the reloading comes from.
All right, I want to talk a little bit about structure. Across the country, it's been going on for years and years and years. People making brush piles, people putting in structure in the body of water that they want to sink brush piles or whatever. Is there a incorrect way or incorrect thing that these people are using across the country to make structure?
Batteries.
Yeah,
Christmas tree with lights.
I mean, I know that. But seriously, Gene, tell the people what is the best way to, if the lake allows it, because there's certain bodies of water that you can't do that.
Right.
All right, that you can't do that. But if the body water allows it, what really is the best method from a structure standpoint?
Well, the first thing is to find out if it's legal or not.
Yeah.
In a lot of bodies of water, it's not legal to put out man-made or even natural brush or structure like that. Some places it is okay as long as you get a permit or you get permission because of navigation issues and that kind of stuff. So that's the first thing, is make sure that you're following the rules. Studies have shown that for black bass, structures, whether it's artificial or whether it's natural material like trees and stuff, that have fairly good sized spaces between the limbs or the pieces, tend to hold bass better than brush that is really tight and small, and like a cedar tree that has really tight, small little spaces. The little bait fish and crappie tend to like those small, tight spaces, but for most of the black bass species, a bigger space is better. And so oak trees tend to be more favorable to bass than, say, cedar trees. You'll see a lot of the artificial structures that are out on the market now that have plastic limbs of various kinds, and the spacing on them is several inches apart, and that helps in terms of being attractive to bass. Bass also like to have things that are horizontal. Crappie like vertical, stake beds and things. Bass tend to like horizontal structures, and so you'll see a tree trunk with limbs going out horizontally. You think about a lay down on along the shore that a bass can get up under.
Right.
That horizontal structure tends to be one of the better things. The other thing, besides making sure that you put them at a depth that's below where there are navigation issue, is think about where that fish lives at different times of the year. In the heat of the summer, when you've got a thermocline developed and there's no oxygen below the thermocline, it doesn't do you any good to put a brush pile out there in 30 feet of water if there's no oxygen, because ain't nothing going to live there.
Right.
They might live there in the wintertime, though. So one of the things we've always tried to talk about is putting structure out in several different zones so that different seasons the fish can move up and down, in and out, depending on water temperature, weather, season, that sort of thing. They have a place to live, and you have a place to catch them, depending on the season of the year.
All right. I've got to ask this, and I don't know if you can recall anything, but I'm curious. What has been an experience that you've had in all the years that you were out doing shocking, that something just crazy happened? Can you recall anything, Gene?
Well, other than electrofishing a beaver now and then, that's pretty exciting. And we used to do our shocking surveys at night, and you got the headlights, and the guy up on the front of the boat can't see anything really other than just what's right there, and you run across a beaver, things get real exciting in a hurry. Beavers don't like electricity, but the one thing that stands out to me of that years ago, there was we were working on an article for Bassmaster Magazine, actually. We got our electrofishing boat and we followed around a bass pro and an outdoor rider who went and fished, and then we came in behind them with the electrofishing boat to show them what they missed. And it was eye-opening.
Wow.
They would pull up to a lay down and just beat the bark off of that tree with every kind of lure in the tackle box and maybe catch one fish, and we'd pull up with the electrofishing boat and pull out 4 or 5 more that were 4 or 5 pounders. Or they'd go to a brush pile and they'd work it and they'd jig it and they'd, worms and jigs and everything else, and we could come in there behind them and just roll fish after fish. And what it really did for me was show that, if you catch a fish somewhere, like I said a minute ago, there's something about that place that fish liked, chances are pretty good there's a whole bunch of them there. And that's one of the things that I've seen a lot of the pros do that your average angler doesn't do. They're going down the bank and they catch a fish, they stop. They don't just keep going down the bank, because something held that fish there, and there's liable to be a bunch more of them there. And that's exactly what we showed with that electric.
Can you say who the pro was?
I'd rather not. It actually was kind of embarrassing at the time. I mean, he went on and had a great career.
Does he still fish?
No.
Okay.
But
will you tell us after the show?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it wound up. It was going to be an article about this pro's career and get him kind of started and getting things going, and they caught 3 or 4 fish during the day, and we electrofished 100.
Wow.
But that's the difference. Electricity has a lot more attractive powers than sometimes a buzzbait does.
I kind of have one more question for me, and it's a fishing question for maybe our viewers can learn from it. You're an angler. You fish with the Bass Club. You fish the Bass Nation stuff. You're an avid angler. There's a lot of biologists who don't really fish as much as you do, and you tournament fish.
Right.
In all your years of experience, if the average listener, if me, if Mark, if we could learn one thing or become more in tune with one thing biologically wise with bass fishing that you think would help people catch more fish, what would that be? You're like, the average guy just doesn't understand this about the species, that would really help them as a whole kind of understand why they're doing what they're doing when they're doing it?
Well, this kind of goes back to the idea that having a biology degree or a fisheries degree and an experience that I've had somehow makes me a better fisherman, and I really don't buy into that, and I'll tell you why. Ken Cook, the late Ken Cook, was a fisheries biologist here in Oklahoma for several years before he turned pro, and for years, every article you ever read about Ken, the very first thing it said was former fishery biologist Ken Cook. And if you ask Ken what was it about that made him such a good fisherman, he would say it's because he spent 300 days a year on the water. It wasn't because of his training and because of his knowledge of the fish. Because in fisheries management, we don't study the behavior of the fish as much as we do how fast they're growing and how big they're getting and what they're eating and where they live and some of that kind of stuff. It's that experience, that time on the water, that really makes all the difference in the world in terms of being a successful angler.
So basically, the lake you need to be fishing on based on the percentage of how many big fish there are in the populations, but it doesn't help you how to catch those fish.
I don't really think it makes that big a difference. You take some of the touring pros that are out there now, that several of them have degrees in fisheries or biology or some sort of natural resources thing. I don't know that gives them any sort of specific advantage near as much as just spending time on the water and learning what happens when and how to make it work in terms of putting fish in the boat.
Favorite thing to do? Catch smallmouth? I know you're going this week.
Oh yeah, far and away.
Yeah.
I've told my wife several times that if I could have a place in Minnesota or Michigan or Wisconsin and another one in Venice, Louisiana, I'd just migrate between catching redfish and smallmouth. We spent 2 weeks 2 weeks ago we were at St. Clair for a week of smallmouth fishing, And we got rained and blown on every day. It was horrible weather, but we still caught some good fish. This next week, I'm going up to Grand Traverse Bay in Michigan and fishing with Chris Knopfsinger, a guide up there. And so I'm really looking forward to it. I have not fished that part of Michigan before, so I'm really looking forward to getting up there and seeing what's available.
All right, very cool. Do you have a platform where if somebody out there has a question for you, is it social media? If somebody has a conservation question, is there a platform for you?
Well, there's two ways. My email address is on bassmaster.com, and there's the Bass Conservation News section. Anybody can email me a question, or they can actually, if they send an email to just info@bassmaster.com and they have a bass biology or a conservation question, it gets routed to me. Or they can just use my Gilliland@bassmaster.com email address. But we also have a bass conservation Facebook page that we're trying to grow the viewership of. And people can put questions and things out there, and we try to provide information on that platform as much as we can.
Super easy to get to. You just go to the Bassmaster website, bassmaster.com, and then scroll over to the tabs on the top, and under the Nation tab, it's the first one and just says conservation.
Right.
All sorts of things about you can read stuff all across the country. Here's stuff from the Classic, from Florida. Oh, there's Lake Shelbyville, something on that. That's kind of the lake that I grew up fishing. That's where I fished my second tournament.
There you
ever.
go.
All right, very cool.
Conservation behind the Classic, all sorts of cool stuff.
Gene, we'd like to have you on again. Thank you so much. Enjoy this week, too, smallmouth fishing. Wow. Wish I could go do that.
You can.
Someday.
You can. What's keeping you from doing it?
Work.
How's the infected leg doing?
It's looking better, man.
Not red and hot anymore.
No, it's not too bad.
Kind of calming down a little bit.
Calm down a little bit.
That's what happens when you let a cat rub up against an open wound, Mark.
That is not it.
You
All
gotta
right,
keep
everybody.
that covered.
I want to thank Gene for taking time out to be a part of the show today. Tomorrow, Brandon Card. Thursday, James Watson. Everybody be safe. Try and stay dry. We are going to batten down the hatchets once again tonight. Sirens go off on Saturday?
Yeah. I was in the Frady hole 5 times in a week.
It's crazy.
Should have been 6, but we just decided to risk it on the 6th one.
Crazy stuff. All right, everybody be safe. We will talk to you tomorrow. We're out of here.